Hello, I'm Nicola and this is Stitches and Slapdashery, and I'm ready to do some more playing in my sewing room. I have a nice big chunk of jeans leg which has got some really usable space on it. It is a teeny stretchy, but I don't think I'm going to worry about that. And this also has a nice usable strip of seam right in the middle of it, and I can work around that. I have a pocket that I took off a different pair of jeans that's been in the stash for some time. I took all the stitching out of that because I decided I wanted to just refresh all the stitching when I attach this to this bag I want to make. I have a couple of belt loops that I have unpicked from a different pair of jeans yet. So this is 3 different pairs of jeans contributing to this bag. And I got all this idea sorted out last night and I was so excited. I stayed up late and I got straight to it again this morning. What I did last night is I drew up a plan for a bag shape. I wanted just to make it out of a single piece of letter size paper or A4, and I just folded it in half, and I'm going to redraw this so that you can see how I did it. And what I'm thinking of is to have, rather than boxed bottoms, is to have a dart here. So in order to get an idea of what it looked like, I sort of creased the dart, the paper dart closed. And actually what I might do is go a little bit smaller on the dart. I'm not sure. I actually quite like the proportions, so maybe I'll stick with what I started with. And then I have magnetic snap in the sort of antique bronze color. And I have 2 clips, swivel clips in antique bronze, which I plan to add to the jean seam to make the strap. I may have to figure out how to attach the strap to this. I may sew it, I may just knot it on. Haven't decided yet. This is going to be more of a recipe than a tutorial, more of a stream of consciousness because I'm making it up as I go along. I have these curtain grommets, which are a great size for bags. They're decorative, but also functional if you want to add a handle with a nice big hole. And so what I thought I would do is I would take this pocket and apply the grommet to here. So there'd be a hole in the pocket, so it wouldn't be a completely usable one, more of a decorative pocket. But then as I was going to sleep last night and not going to sleep because I was thinking about this, I thought maybe I would take some of my lining and pop it behind the hole in the pocket so that you can see the lining and then you can still use the pocket. We'll see how that develops. And then the lining is going to be some really fun chenille. I had this in the stash and it's only about 0.2 of a meter, maybe a bit more, maybe about 0.3 of a meter, about 12 inches high, but that's going to be just perfect for my bag. I got it as a remnant or just a freebie extra at work when I was working at the fabric store because it actually has holes in it over here, but I'm going to work around the holes obviously. So everything was in stash. I've loaded up my machine with some 100% nylon upholstery thread because it's a little bit stronger for sewing the denim. I've got a Microtex 80 needle in there because I love Microtex needles. They're super sharp. It should work perfectly. So I think I'm ready to get started. I'm really excited about this. This is what I'm proposing to do. Just taking a letter size piece of paper, folding it in half, and then I'm going to make a mark at 4 inches from the fold, right there, and then another mark at 5 inches down from the top. And then I am going to mark a point two inches square. So I've got my 2-inch quilting ruler markings here. I've marked a point here, here, and here. Now, what I might do is amend my initial decision to make the dart a rectangle. I may bring it in a little bit, but we're going to wing that in a minute. So this is 4 inches. This measurement is 5 inches, and this is 2 inches. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw a line from here, slightly curving outwards to here. I can always level it out a bit or even it out a bit when I am cutting it out. And then the line is going to come down the side, and when I get to my 2-inch marks, I am going to make a curved line to remove that corner. I did this better last night. So this is what I have so far. And then from my dart point, which is here, I think I am going to use less than a 90-degree angle. So this would be a 90-degree angle, which I will just put in as a dotted line for a minute. And then I think I'll just come in a little bit from that and draw the lines like this. This is very technical, of course, very accurate, very slapdash, just like me. So I'm just going to see whether I like that. I'm going to just fold on my dart lines to see what sort of shape I'm getting. I quite like that. When I match up my solid lines, I'm going to get a nice rounded bottom on the bag. So all I need to do is fold it back in half and cut around that with my not fabric scissors. I'm going to cut out my dart, and there's my paper pattern. Now what I did is when I had made my first version of this, I did put it up against my piece of denim to make sure that I would be able to cut it out without seams. Now there's no reason why when you're upcycling denim you can't put your pattern piece over a seam. It's a feature, totally fine. But in this case, I want to keep the seam uncut. So I made sure that when I did this last night, I had enough clear denim to cut 2 of these out, one above the other on this leg. This must have been a massive pair of jeans because there's so much usable fabric in here. If you're looking to upcycle denim, it's a great idea to let family and friends know that you're looking for it, because it's much better than them going in a landfill if they've got holes in them, because there's still going to be lots of usable things on them, whether it's the pockets or zippers or just the back of the leg or whatever. So I think I'm happy with that. My pattern is done. So before I cut my pattern pieces out, I'm going to cut the seam off. I want to use this leg seam, which is about, I think, 30 inches long, as the strap for the bag. I'm just going to cut it, and I'm not going to finish it in any way, probably, unless I change my mind on that later on. At this point, I might leave a little bit of fabric at the side of it, just in case I have an idea of maybe folding some fabric back and sewing it down. Yep, I'll probably end up just trimming that right back to the stitching, but we'll put that aside for now. So I'm going to try and get the bag be oriented as much as possible with the grain of the fabric. I'm going to try and maximize my fabric here. Now, this is going to be a fairly small bag. I am just trying to decide whether I want to add seam allowances to this or have this pattern as including seam allowances. I think because of the amount of jean I have here, when it gets down here, it gets narrower. I'm going to just make this include the seam allowances, and I'll probably do 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowances because that's the size of my walking foot, and that's just easy. Pop my little pattern weights on there, my little homemade pattern weights, and cut them out. As my 2 pieces of outer fabric. These belt loops, I took all the stitching out of these as well. They're quite long. They were doubled over and put into the seam. It was a fairly sturdy pair of jeans that my oldest son had. So I think I'm going to do either some rows of straight stitching along this or some decorative stitching just to reinforce them because they are a little worn. So that'll be one of my first sewing jobs. And then I think the next thing I'm going to do is apply the grommet to pockets. These grommets are super easy. All you need to do is draw a circle, cut the hole, and then they snap in by hand. These are the grommets I'm using. They're called Creations grommets. They're available from Fabricland in Canada and probably lots of other places too. They have a cut-out hole on the back of the pocket which you can use as a template for cutting your hole in your fabric. What I tend to do is completely forget about that and then rip into it, which is not a good idea. So just so that I'm doing it properly, let's whip those grommets out of the pocket there. Now I need to figure out roughly where my center is. Kind of hard to see the silver pencil on here, but my friction pens aren't really going to show up either. You can just about see where my line is. I'm just going to snip into the center of the pocket with my sharp little scissors, or maybe not. Maybe I'll just use these to get started. There we are. It's really hard to see where my pencil mark is. But better to err on the side of too small than too large. We just put the grommet with the deeper back to it on there. Oh yeah, that works. And then the thinner side, just push on and it snaps on. And that's it done. I rather like that. These grommets are not super strong. I did try putting them in a bag once as the top of a backpack, and they probably would have been fine, except that the fabric was stretchy and it kept pulling out of the grommets. If I had interfaced it so it didn't stretch, it probably would have been fine. But for this purpose, I think will be good. Now the question is, do I want to have a little bit of chenille poking through the hole? I think that would be kind of cool. So what I could do is just sew a piece of chenille to the back of this. I'm liking that idea. I'll go to the crummy end of my fabric, cut a little piece out of that, and that can be my next sewing job after the belt loops. Unfortunately, I have not got to the stage in my sewing career where I have a serger, because it probably would be nice to finish off the fuzzy edges of my chenille, but I'll figure something out. I have some of this grey interfacing. I think it might be a fusible, but I'm not going to fuse it. But I am going to snip a couple of small pieces of that to go behind my magnetic snaps. And now I just need to cut my lining. There's going to be fluff everywhere now. This is a thicker thread than I have been sewing with recently, so I'm just going to check what the stitch looks like, where I need to change my tension. It's not perfect, but I don't really want to go above a 9 on my tension dial, and I'd rather not faff about with the bobbin tension. It's not something I usually do with this drop-in bobbin machine, so we're going to stick with that. I'm going to go to a 3 stitch length and stitch down this little belt loop. I'll start with a little leader fabric to get me started. I did 4 lines of straight stitching down the length of these belt loops. These are just going to be folded in half later on, incorporated in the top sides of the bag so that the swivel clips can attach to them. Main reason for doing this, I only had 1 D-ring in the antique bronze, so we're using denim. Going to use my brain here, and I'm going to use double-sided tape to hold the chenille in place while I stitch it on. It just makes more sense than trying to pin it. This is going to be a lumpy enough job as it is. And I'll probably want to stitch it from the front, so I definitely don't want it to shift. All right, the chenille is stuck face down so that you can see the right side through the hole in the grommet. Wish me luck. Okay, I was thinking of sewing around the circle, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew along these lines, which were the original seam lines. On the pocket. Just going to stretch that out a bit so it's covering the back of the seam lines. And I'll go back to a length 3 and give it a go. Okay, that caught all my edges. I'm just going to trim the fuzzies and call that done. Guess I'm going to be vacuuming later. Okay, so here we go. The pocket is done. That came out better than I could have expected. So my next job will be to attach my pocket to the front of my bag. So I'm just going to mark my center here. It's kind of hard to fold this in half, so I'm just going to eyeball it. Now I have to be careful here because I was thinking of top stitching low down on this bag, and I don't want this to interfere, but also I don't want my pocket to be too low because it'll interfere with the base. Having attempted to pin it, I think I'm going to go with the double-sided tape again. I'm just going to use the double-sided tape on the two side parts because obviously I don't want the top to be stuck shut. That should do to hold it in place. I'll pin the top edge because it's not stuck down. My machine isn't totally happy with sewing this, but it seems to have managed it so far. Spoke too soon. That's the pocket sewn on. My machine got a little upset with me at the last few stitches, but at that point I was able to just coax it along by hand and get the pocket sewn on. Getting a little bit of chenille poking out the sides, which is not really what I was after, but I may be able to trim that later. And next, I'm going to sew my darts. I'm just going to fold the fabric right sides together on itself along the dart lines and pop a little seam in there on all the 4 pieces. Now, what I've decided to do for the rest of the bag is just put my regular Gutermann thread in. The thicker thread was causing problems with my machine, and whilst it was nice for the visible stitching here, for the seaming I do not need that sort of strength. It's not going to be holding a lot, and my machine will be far happier without it. This is what the lining is looking like with the darts sewn. Next step is going to be inserting the magnetic snaps. I have my female part, my male part, and my two washers. Just need to figure out where the center of this is so I know where to put my interfacing on the back. There's my center. I'm leaning heavily on the double-sided tape today. I'm going to put the top of the magnetic snap an inch from the top because I don't want it to interfere with my stitching. All right, this is really tricky, trying to get it centered up, and also I'm obviously having to go through the chenille, so this is going to be fun. Take that off now. I'm going to do this from the back so I can go through the interfacing and then the chenille and then back up through both layers and cut. This seam ripper's seen some action the last couple of days. Okay. I have no idea where my slots are. When I look at the other side, you cannot see a thing. So I'm just going to have to guess. All right, I made it. I just need to grab my washer. Pop it over there. Usually press it outwards. I think it's personal choice as to whether you press it outwards or inwards, but I always press it outwards. Ooh, success! Phew, that was intense. Okay, now for the second one. I'm going to fold my little belt loops and just baste them in half to make it easier for them to stay put while I am sewing them in afterwards. Putting my bag pieces right side together. When I'm doing my darts, I'm nesting my seams so the seam allowances go in opposite directions. I want them to look lined up when they are sewn. That's my outer seam sewn. Now I need to do it with my chenille. And my inside is ready to go. Before I attach the two together, I need to baste in my belt loops on the right side. Okay, opening out my seam allowance, putting it on the outside, lined up with the seam, raw edges, matching with raw edges. I'm going to overlap it a little bit. I'm going to have it so, can you even see that? My seam allowance on my belt loop is going to be sticking into the seam a little bit I'd rather have it sticking in too far and then trim it than to have it barely holding on. Okay, I've basted the belt loops on the side here so that when I have the bag inside the lining, they won't shift. I need to just figure out which way round I want this. Do I care which way round the magnetic snap is in relation to the front of the bag? I think I'd like this side to be the more visible side, so that should go up against the back of the bag. I just realized I didn't leave a hole in the lining for turning, so even though it's going to be a challenge with the chenille, I will just unpick a little bit of the seam when I have done at the top. I'm probably going to be cursing all these clips when it comes time to put this on the free arm of my machine because they're going to catch. We'll worry about that when the time comes. My outer was turned right side out. My inner is still wrong side out. So I have the right sides of each layer facing each other. I have clipped the top like crazy. Let's hope the next part goes well. That went better than I expected. And now I have to do that unpicking because, as I say, I didn't leave myself a turning gap. I unpicked a little bit of the seam and then I used some double-sided tape to hold back my seam allowances while I pull it through, just thinking it should make it easier to sew up the lining afterwards. I tried to use the smallest hole possible. Oh, it looks like it'll be okay. I was a bit concerned about the bulk of that pocket there. Before I sew up the gap in the lining, I'm going to push this into the bag and see how it looks. Oh wow, I think this is looking exactly how I wanted it to. I am not going to attempt to top stitch, I don't think. I think that will just be asking for trouble. Yep. Thinking about this strap, I think with the strap I could just knot it directly to the belt loops, but I think it would look nicer to have it attached to the hardware. I think that would look nicer, just a bit fancier. But anyway, let me just get that lining sewn up and we'll take it from there. I'm going to do this as invisibly as possible. Shouldn't be hard with this fluffy fabric. And with that double-sided tape holding everything together, I think we're going to be looking good. After all, this is an upcycle denim bag and a little bit of a raw edge on part of it. Perfectly acceptable. Now I have to make a decision. A 30-inch strap isn't super long. If I just put this through the hardware and sew it, I will lose less length than if I knot it. The knot is a more informal finish, I suppose, and the folding over and sewing would be a little neater. I quite like the knot, but there's not really a way of me sewing it, so I think I may try sewing it. Oh, look how much that frayed just from me playing around with it there. I noticed this was fraying quite a bit, so I'm forcing it to let go of its little threads. I'm not 100% sure whether I should go with the strap like this or whether I should just cut a long strip out of another jeans leg and make a tidier strap. What would you do? Would you be happy with this? I think it's kind of fun. Let's put it on the bag and see. I'm still in two minds about the top stitching. As I'm looking at it, the inside is not looking as tidy as it could. Ideally, I'd like it to hold, maybe so that the chenille could stick out a little bit above the top. As it is, it's sinking in a bit. It's just that those magnetic clasps are quite close to the top, and it gets really, really bulky in here. It's finished. What do you think? Came out just like my vision. That always feels good. Pocket still usable. A nice fuzzy lining. The bag has its nice fuzzy lining. The strap works well. It's not a particularly long strap, but it works as a shoulder bag even for an adult. I don't think it would work as a crossbody. So I might later on consider doing a longer strap in denim so that it can be worn as a crossbody. That's something I can change my mind about later on, right? All right. Well, I hope that was helpful and I hope that was entertaining. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video today, please do give me a like. You know what to do. And I'll be hopefully back to show you some more stuff soon.